All right, everyone. It is 6 o'clock on a Tuesday, so you know what that means. We are going to get started with our New Jersey Cannabis Training Academy live Q&A webinars. As always, just welcome. Thank you for coming. If you're in the chat, feel free to drop where you're dialing in from, or if you have any small wins that you have going on for the week, we'd love to support you, cheer you up, and fill us in on what's been happening with your cannabis journey in the chat. Again, in the chat is where you can also put in some questions if you didn't already put in some pre-submitted questions. If you're here and this is your first time, welcome. Thank you again for coming. We know this process could be challenging, applying for adult use cannabis license, but the point of the CTA is to provide you with this no cost free information that can help you navigate some of the steps that we've seen throughout the industry and make your process a lot way more seamless. So if your dreams and hopes are for submitting an application, don't worry, you come to the right spot. Today, we are on level 8, and we're going to continue our level 8 series where we're going to talk about safety and security. And we're going to try to talk about what that looks like through any license type. We have our expert here from level 8, Marie Marquette, security expert, delivery expert as well. She is your instructor for 2 courses, and I'll have her introduce herself shortly. But again, just going to give a quick roundup of how this works for any new folks in the room. So in a moment, we'll have, again, Marie introduce herself. And after that, we'll go through the pre-submitted questions that we got from folks. Again, but if you do have any questions while we're having our conversation, feel free to drop those in the chat or put them in the Q&A box, which is also open. For this, we want to keep our questions on topic. You may have questions about some of the things you're seeing within the portal. If you want, we can get back to those at the end of the conversation, but during our time, we really want to focus on the topic at hand, which again is safety and security, and we'll talk about that soon. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Marie, and please, Marie, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Precious, for having me here. Really excited to go through this Q&A with everyone. My name is Marie Momarque. I am an operator out of California. I moved out here, originally a Nashville native. I moved out here in 2010 to get involved in cannabis, and I created a lot of businesses with my brother in the medicinal realm as well as the recreational realm. And I have a lot of expertise in large scale delivery, like Precious was saying, and cultivation operations in California. But I specialize a lot in safety and security. I have a lot of experience managing facilities, inventory, personnel, and a lot of really high risk environments. So I understand a lot about integrated security and security planning and implementation. I'm the director of compliance for multiple cannabis operations in the Oakland area. So I manage about 10 acres of double story, all cultivation complexes that keep me very, very busy day in and day out. I was there earlier today, just like testing my electric fences and making sure the voltage is right. So I do a plethora of things on the compound, including all of our burglary and armed guards, which we have 24/7, anything to deal with our fire system, you name it, pretty much. Access controls, gates, electric fences. So really happy to be here with you guys today. I won't talk too much more about myself, but happy to dive into everything we're going to talk about in safety and security plans.
Just from that intro alone, it was like 10 questions buzzing, electric fences, fire defense mechanisms. Like, are you throwing? Okay, let me kind of stay on topic because safety and security is actually quite important when we think about the cannabis industry and what we've learned. And I'd love to understand like how you've seen it grow. So we'll pretty much just start from there. Like, can you talk to us about the importance of safety and security and why has it been such a staple in moving forward with your cannabis process for regulators?
Yeah, I would say from my perspective, you can't do anything without it. You can't comfortably run your operation on a day-to-day basis without feeling like your employees are safe, without your employees feeling like they are actually safe, without your inventory being safe and secure, and of course, the money. So all of these pieces are really, really important, especially in a cash-heavy environment, right? So we have a high cash environment. It's a high value target that's always on the move, maybe, or some things are constantly moving in and out of your facility. Regulatory compliance, right? Like it's so important for the regulators to understand why your business is safe, how your
Yeah.
business is safe, protocols that you're training your employees on to keep your business safe. So, I mean, you really can't sleep comfortably at night without,
Yeah.
you know, do you have your surveillance system up? Is it up 24/7? Can you see it on your phone? Can you run playback? I mean, there's every little element about employee safety and just your business in general that you're gonna want to have so thorough.
Yeah.
And these are all the things, right? Like you don't want to deal with on day-to-day basis, right? Like emergency protocols or things that you have to do to mitigate natural disasters. It's all the things that are like way down the list, but it's the most
Yeah.
important thing for you to really understand.
Yeah, and how I want to structure this conversation, I want to talk about what drafting a safety and security plan on paper looks like versus like the actual action and like who are the people that actually help because there's a cost to this that I feel like it's unavoidable. We talk about, the money spent in cannabis to build your operation. Safety and security is not one of those things that you can just simp on and like add a camera, call it a day. But before we even dive into that, I also want to level set about like what we've seen in the industry that's just been not pretty, like why this high complex level of security is even needed when it comes to cannabis. Like, can you just tell us a little bit about that, especially, working in the California market or the West Coast markets? I'm sure you've seen a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I have seen enough of enough, on the day-to-day basis. Even I have facilities where, we do everything that we can to keep everybody safe inside the property, but we can't necessarily keep you safe when you leave the property. So I had a tenant of mine get carjacked even like 2 weeks ago, and just like the commonality of these things, especially in Oakland, where if I do get the 911 operators to dispatch me directly to the Oakland Police Department, which is a hoop I have to jump through to begin with, and then the things that I have to do to get them there, and then it might take them, 8 hours. So it's so much more important for me to slow everything down and create redundancy and do everything that I can to prevent an issue.
Mhm.
I mean, a great example is like my fencing. We
Mhm.
have three-step redundancy is like the one thing that helps me and everybody else sleep good at night when it comes to just the fence by itself. So we have a standard wrought iron fence. It's not necessarily one of those chain mesh fence, like a very tall wrought iron fence. And then we have mesh inside of that, which is all one thing, we'll call it. Then inside of that, we have electric fencing, which I spoke on a little bit. And then outside or inside, I either have arms, like sliding gate arms, which are like barrier proof arms, right? Or I have what's called a T-rail or just a cement barrier, those 3 foot or 5 foot barriers that you have to move in place with a forklift. And
Yeah.
I have those surrounding my entire property because
Yeah.
the easiest thing for any of these guys to do, whether it's retail or cultivation, like they just want to drive a car in and out because for them the access point there is the best case scenario for them to get away because they're in and out. So for me it's like redundancy, slow them down, make sure I have a barrier in between their car and my fencing and anything else. But to your point, it's practical things because
Yeah.
even if you're in a city that the police may come in 2 minutes and that's something, you should find out your local police time frames. But in that 2 minutes, a lot of damage can be done. A lot of
Yeah.
damage, potentially your safe can be ripped out, a lot of things. So it's so important, like you say, to kind of build from the inside out in all these worst case scenarios and make sure that you have that redundancy and prevention in place.
Yeah, all right. So let's talk about that building. People who are just getting into the cannabis industry, one of the parts you have to fulfill, I'm sure both on a local and in your application, is that safety and security plan. What are the most common compliance features you want to make sure when you're submitting? And let's talk about it almost twofold, if you could, on the cultivation level versus what you're seeing on the dispensary level. Like, what should you make sure you're focusing on or your plan is encompassing?
The number one thing, like I would just say, like the number one thing you want to do is make sure it matches. Make sure your
Mhm.
site plan exactly matches everything that you've already submitted up to this point with the city. Make sure you've isolated every security feature that you have is properly labeled. Like
Yeah.
surprisingly enough, like things missing out of the application and or mislabeling and or just like not understanding the like for likeness that you have to submit everything instead of resubmitting. So, I mean, you the things that I have seen that I hate seeing are like after the fact, right? Like plan for your ADA. Like
Yeah,
plan, don't put a door on that's the most secure door in the world. It's Fort Knox, but it's not ADA compliant. You know,
yeah,
certain things you want to talk to the fire code inspector, talk to whoever is going to be inspecting these things through the building and planning department to kind of make sure that you're planning for the zoning, you're planning for ADA, you're planning for fire code ahead of submitting these things. Because if, for say, like in San Francisco, there's an 80-foot minimum that you have to have, and if you don't have that, you have to put in fire sprinklers. And if you're submitting a fire and safety plan and you didn't know that information, it's going to easily be kicked back. So it's like just making sure that you're thorough and you're
hmm
really detailed and everything, and you're
hmm
including processes. You know, you're not just saying,
hmm
if an emergency happens, we'll
yeah,
make sure to mitigate the emergency. You know, you're going into exactly what the emergency would be, like whatever the active universe could potentially be happening, and you're giving a process for a resolution.
yeah. So even with safety, when you're putting it down on the SOP, so you're kind of saying you also have to write like, in the case of this happens, here's how we would handle it. In the case of this happens. So when you're planning for that, do you need input at that point of submitting and writing your application from places like fire, police, municipal? Like, do you need to have their input into your plan even when you're just planning?
I would recommend it. I mean, as soon as you can take your site, you don't want to start too early in a way, like you want to make sure to get the best use of everyone's time. But once you've identified your premise and you have a site plan from your
Mhm.
architect where you can then pass that forward to whoever's going to be working on your fire code with you, your safety and security plan with you, your security features, whether it's a local burglary company or whoever else that you're bringing in as a third party. These are definitely all things that like the moment you have identified your location and you
Yeah,
can sit and do a walk, do a site walk with these people, bring them in immediately. Again, like the
yeah,
worst thing is like, oh, you're doing your final walkthrough and you realize your $10,000 doors aren't compliant. You
yeah,
know, the
yeah,
faster you can bring someone in and identify all of your risks, right? Any external risk, any internal risk, like where you actually want to put your safe, where you want to identify secured features, like the rooms that you want to have strictly secure inside the property and then build around it, but
hmm
do it as compliantly as possible. And a lot of times, like, it's not necessarily like this in this case, but usually they'll require someone that is like a ex-fire chief that has made a business out of making fire plans come and do a walkthrough and not necessarily certify, but you pay them to do drawings and descriptions and identify features with you to make sure that this office is X amount from the nearest exit and people can get out if there is a fire. I would never want to do this like without having help because it's a
yeah,
guaranteed, like you think you might be saving money today. You're like, it's $5,000 for this safety and security plan to talk to the fire code inspector that's going to help you, not inspector, but the person that's going to help you through this
yeah,
process. But it's going to cost you $20,000, $30,000 if you delay and you have a month and you have to get re-inspected and then you have to
yeah.
do some work in your interior from your build out that's not going to, I mean, there's each mistake, like one small mistake is always going to cost you 20 headaches.
And I know when you said when you get your site plan and it's finalized, I think a lot of people really have to like remember that because people want to change things and move things around. And something you said earlier, making sure your security plan matches your site plan because where you're placing cameras, where you're placing your vault, it'll cost money to have folks redraw that and rechange that. So I just wanted to highlight that and bring that to the forefront to say like when your site plan is complete, unless it's absolutely necessary, remember like these things have additional costs because again, safety and security, you don't want to assume, you want to ask, okay? Very much so. My next question is more so around like technology when you're building and writing your SOPs for security. What are you basically saying about that? Like, what are you saying about cameras? What are you saying about keyframes? And even too, what are you saying about personnel in those SOPs that you're writing?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of technology that you want to establish within the beginning of these processes, right? Like how are you identifying your employees? Are they getting RFID badges? Are you scanning them in and scanning them out? How does that coordinate with your security? Do you have security? Is this information they will have? Um, Surveillance, of course, is like a huge piece within itself.
Yeah,
Like you can go so crazy on cameras these days where like you can integrate AI to show you one directional, anything that's not going the direction that you've established, it'll automatically trigger something for you. So like you can get really high tech, or you can just set up, the basic ADT. You can have, I wouldn't recommend it, but you could have monitoring that's like the same thing your mom had at her house in
yeah,
1990, right? And like all the
yeah,
things of that nature. But you really want to have something way more robust. And then high resolution cameras that'll give you electronic notification, almost like your Ring camera, but then
yeah.
even further into like third parties that sit and watch your zone. And if something happens, they have speakers that you've already put
Mhm.
in. They can speak down. And then a lot of times they can have codes that can get the local, like for us, get the local PD there faster, which is crucial than just like a person calling in from a guard shack. But there's so much technology. Like for me, I have my electronic fences, the electric fences. I have an app just for the fences where I can arm, disarm. With my cameras, I have all the properties integrated into one app as well. So I can switch
Yeah,
between multiple locations inside one app and have
that's
accurate playback where I can like zoom all the way into, let's say a car door, right? And I can buffer
mhm.
within, I can go as fast as I want or I can go as slow as I want, just keying in, waiting for a very direct feature. And so but the crucial thing about all of these things are I had to redo all this because originally
Mhm.
it wasn't established to have such robust active third party monitoring, right? So it's like
Right.
the cart before the horse is so easy on these things because you're like, oh, I can just go to Costco and grab that camera in the box. But that camera in the box, the
Yeah,
technology that comes with that isn't going to integrate with the technology that you might want. And the same thing with your
yeah,
fob system, right? Everything needs a record. You're not only identifying employees, but you're recording every single door that they're walking through when you have limited access, restricted access areas. And then
yeah,
all
yeah.
that.
Especially in cultivations and manufacturing processing facilities.
Absolutely. So you might have a lot of people that can get on the property. Are they visitors? Are they customers? Whether it's
Right.
retail, manufacturing, and then what door are they walking into? What time? You can set up automatic notification systems for different times of the day, right? Where even if they're a manager and they have access, like why are they there at, 1 in the morning? And then boom,
Yeah,
automatically, your alarm could have that as well. So you can really use technology and get extremely detailed depending on your budget, but the thing that I always plan for is like, if you're gonna have third party video monitoring,
yeah,
you need to understand the starting steps and the hardware required. So you don't want to buy all of these things that you think might integrate. You want to get all the way through these processes, become
yeah.
confident with a company, and then go back and purchase whatever you might be missing for that.
One thing I want to get on too, in terms of like SOPs, is like the personnel needed to help you execute safety and security plans. I know you mentioned like your local burglary store and or like consultants. When I went through a process of putting together a security plan, I felt like I didn't realize there were multiple layers of folks, especially when you get the hardware and equipment, right? And you get the integrations and like who talks to who brings what. Does your consultant come as a one-stop package, or does your consultant just do a draft and then you got to hire people within the draft? Like, can you talk about some of like the best practices you see or what you would recommend for new and up and coming business owners to be also cost effective and also timely? Timing, I think, is extremely important when you're thinking about launching safety and security. It's not necessarily the first step in your cannabis application, but it's not the last, right? If you're looking to be efficient with your funds. So just going back to my question, like if you hire somebody, what are you really hiring for? What should they be giving you? And what should you look out for with that multi integration situation? Like your cameras can come somewhere, but your data room comes from another place. Is that something people want? Is it something to avoid?
I definitely feel like this is like that ultimate question because first thing that came to mind was like the infamous IT guy. You know,
Yeah.
you want to get rid of your IT company or like your company you're working with networking, and then you're all of a sudden like you're without an IT guy. Like, and then what is an IT guy? Like what does this person do? I think for all of us, you definitely want the vendor that you're consulting with, whatever hardware you're comfortable buying, or whatever third party, maybe even your active video monitoring or your security company, to work within this framework. Like
Hmm.
like for me, the most important thing was my security company is inside my cameras, so they
Hmm.
can mitigate issues before they call me at 3 a.m. They can
Hmm.
also establish all of the safety procedures as well inside of this framework. They
Hmm.
also are the first person notified when my Wi-Fi goes down. And
Hmm.
they have a IT, like for me, I prefer an all-in-one. They're always not so good. People are really good on talking the talk, but then walking the walk is my IT company, or my security company rather, they have an IT person. Like he is
Hmm.
an established person within, he deals with Wi-Fi, firewalls, fobs, anything I train them on, the electric fences, anything I want them to do. They fly drones, so they literally have FAA regulation where they'll send up a drone. I say all this to say he deals with all of those things. The
Yeah.
camera integration, like first I hired them for cameras and they weren't necessarily on my full personnel for all my armed guards yet. And it's still just so disjointed. And then I had a camera company that was separate from them, right? So
Yeah.
anytime there's an issue, and then my camera company is the first one getting the Wi-Fi notification if something goes down, but they're terrible in the communication chain to bring it down to me, which would be
Mm.
our security on the ground dealing with this. So
Yeah.
it's like being able to filter it all into one place is the goal, but are there a
Yeah.
lot of places where that's the practice? Not necessarily yet, but these are the things you want to ask. You want to understand, are you dealing with all of my hardware and my software? Like, and what
Right.
personnel do you have established for all support? And
Yeah.
give me all the practices. Like when my Wi-Fi goes down, then what happens? If a camera goes out, then what happens? Like you said, time is money too. It's like if I need
Yeah.
to add cameras, how long does that take? How long
Right.
does that take? If my employees are getting robbed on this corner and I need a camera on that corner, is it going to take you 3 weeks? But this
Yeah.
just goes back to all of the things that you don't even think about, because then it's electrical. Well, is
Mm.
power there? Like everywhere that you want surveillance, most cases you need power, right? So
Yeah.
like how long is it going to take to bring in your electrician to bring power to that place? So there's
Yeah.
a lot of moving parts. And then this goes back to how robust your security team is, because do you have an electrician? Is it their electrician? Who's pulling cable? It's like
Yeah.
there's a lot of lower level things that you don't think about that you might not need an electrician for, but do you have
Yeah.
someone that can pull the cable? But again, like time is money. It's good to have someone in-house that can help you put together like the established flow of contractor work per se, or
Hmm.
you definitely need to hire the all-in-one. But again, you have to vet those. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I bring it up because one thing I'm seeing happen in the industry, people hire a bunch of people, a bunch of consultants, and you end up going through a lot of money and not really needed. So I'm hoping this conversation for those who are listening is helping you essentially do your research, investigate, ask a ton of questions. There are no stupid questions when it comes to your time, when it comes to your money and your efficiency. What do you offer? How do you talk to folks? Because what does your IT system look like? Is it someone in-house? Is it someone outsourced that can kind of control and see everything? How are you getting your armed guards? Is it going to be coming from that company, or do you have to go to a separate area and bring those armed guards? And now you need to train everybody. So all of these conversations and communications are happening because again, a security breach is it doesn't end up really good in the cannabis industry. We're talking about high volumes of cash being exposed, inventory, thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars of inventory being exposed. So this is why we mentioned these things. I want to go to a couple questions in the chat before I switch gears now and talk more about the implementation. I'll start here with Janet. She says the vendor for metric and security are two different things. Which works together, or how to figure out what works best for your business? I'm wondering if you're asking if metric has to be involved in those security features.
No, so I would look at them in two separate. You want to log for metric. You want to log things and record everything for audits that you might have based upon record keeping. But metric will be completely done whether solely in metric, which you can do that for cultivation, and
Yeah,
track and trace will be solely done in metric. So let's just
yeah.
say for easy, like let's say you harvest 1,000 pounds. You put in metric, your dry weight, your wet weight, you finish. You're like, I got 500 pounds for sale.
Mm,
That will then be tracked by metric, right? But the other side of the safety and security would be like, how was it processed safely? How
mhm,
was it tracked inside internally? Were you using barcodes? Were you logging it? Was it on camera? If something
mhm.
happens and the state wants to come to you, so this is perfect example of where it all goes together. The
Yeah.
state, for whatever reason, something gets flagged. Let's say you have a distro that processed something that was recalled. They come to your facility. They're like, show me the camera from when you processed this. Show me the lab tests. Show me your secured storage. Show me the key fob record of everyone that entered and exited the room with those cameras. If you destroyed it, same thing. Show me the log of destruction. Show me the receipt of the company that came and picked it up. Show me all the. So metric really like it's one of those things where it's just numbers and things that you're entering into a system that needs to match with the scale and the weight and the tracking of even like the packaging, right? Like once you packaged it, blah, blah, blah. But the security on the other side of how you mitigate risk within your business will be more of an internal process
Yeah.
you create.
Yeah. And please know, you will get fined if you cannot produce some of that information, and your license will be in jeopardy. Hence why it's so important when you're logging information. And I encourage all of you guys to go back to those CRC rules and see what they wrote there for safety and security, and even your local zone rules, because your municipality can add a level of rules that say, hey, you need to keep camera footage stored for at least 120 days before you delete anything, or at least a minimum of X days. So you need to make sure you have these records ready to show. So that's a great spread, like metric, track, and trace product inventory for sure. Safety and security, still track and trace of where that product and inventory moves in the flow and so on and so forth. That was chef's kiss put, Marie. Appreciate that. Another question we got here was, I think this is referring to the app that you said you were using to support your security. Is this an app that folks can look at themselves, or did you build this? Because that
Oh
was
no,
my
I did
thought,
not.
that you may have built this because I want to put it
No,
past you, but
there's no, I did not build this. I cannot take any credit for this. There's levels to it too. Though I have one property where I only have three cameras on. So that app is it's called DW Mobile Plus. It's like a very lower level. I mean, it's like a entry level, I'll call it, right? The
Mhm.
one where I have like 50 plus cameras set up on each facility and I can toggle back and forth. Same company, and it's called like literally the letter D W, yeah, Digital
Yeah,
Watchdog.
yeah, we
Digital
just put it in the
Watchdog
chat.
Special.
Shout out to our executive director, Tawheed, who was in the chat, just dropped it in there. So if you guys want to check that out. All right, we'll keep going
And
with
I
some of
don't
the,
work for them or anything, but I would talk to whoever, like if you're gonna do active video monitoring, which I highly recommend, they're gonna tell you what DVRs they can integrate with and what that looks like for you. So it's a great system. I highly recommend it. And when you talk to your third party, you tell them, like, if you have multiple facilities, you tell them, I want to toggle between them, I want playback, I want all these things and test it out. But I use that one specifically, not just because it works really, really well, but it integrates with my active video monitoring.
nice. Thanks for that, Jim. Another question here is, do you have to notify the CRC if there's a problem with security cameras or system or power outage that cuts the feed? Like exactly, if something happens, who's your first call?
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't have the exact number of hours. Like I think it has to be a threshold, right?
Hmm.
Like if your power is out for 1 minute, I don't think you have to notify the CRC. But if it's
Hmm.
down for 3+ hours, you might have to notify. If you're in business and you go into like offline mode, you would absolutely have to notify them that you're in a manual point of sale
Mhm.
system as you're not digitally reporting. And this can trigger a lot of other issues because your point of sale is automatically sending APIs. So this can cause your inventory to be off. It can
Yeah,
create processing issues. I mean, it's hard to be open when you're in these scenarios, but there's definitely a list of all the things that would trigger you to need to reach out. And they're always about discrepancies, a percentage of discrepancies that your business might have overall with your overall inventory, a robbery, missing inventory for any reason. There's tons of reasons why you might have to notify the CRC, but that's really, really key for you to know every single one. So, and not only that, but train your employees because these are the things you lose your license over, right? Like if you have a discrepancy and it's continual and no one's notifying management, and then you have an audit and you don't know why, it's hard to continue operating.
issues are going to escalate for sure. And I'll also add, if you look at your local municipality rules, because we all know there are CRC rules, but I have seen several times that your municipality is adding other layers of security features that you need to implement, such as calling your local fire or police department if a certain breach happens by, at a certain level. So definitely make sure you are starting to be in cahoots with those people and learning about their processes, how they engage and work with businesses when it comes to safety and security, because you kind of want them as an ally than an adversary down the line.
And in
We'll just
certain
keep going
cases,
here
you
with some of
need
these. Go
to,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, in certain cases, you need to notify metric as well. So you
Yeah.
have the CRC who, well, you got layers upon layers, right? Because we have your local
Yeah.
authority, which might have more stringent rules for you, record keeping and or notification wise, and then the state, and then the CRC. So CRC with the state, and then, different, yeah. So point being, make sure that you're in compliance with all of
Yeah.
these layers.
And this is why you have an SOP, because if it's written down in your standard operating procedure, you don't need to think off the top of your head, where's my first call? You pull out that SOP manual, you look at what you've implemented, and you start just walking through your SOPs. We have another couple good questions here from the chat, so I'm gonna keep going before I jump back in. We have one here that says, how do you handle vendor changes? Like if you had a security contractor or let's say an armed guard contractor and you had to adjust, how do you make sure there isn't that sort of drop in process and day to day, or you can kind of keep them up to speed, or do every security company that works in cannabis jump in and know what to do as soon as you hire them?
Man, it's such a good question. It's like the thing you dread, like changing point of sale systems almost like mid operation, like your business flow, all of your tenants, all your employees, like depending upon, like for me, I'll speak to just like the biggest overhaul of it where I have a lot of different tenants that all have dozens and dozens of employees. So me retraining, I don't have to just train security. I have to train my employees on how to interact with whatever new protocol that I'm bringing in. So it was going from a badge with your face to a badge with no face with an RFID scanner on there, which would then
Mhm.
require all my tenants to scan in and out of the property, which they were not used to. And there was some pushback, some not pushback, whatever the case. But for me, it's a major overhaul. It doesn't matter if you're, apples for apples, if you're not changing anything, but just making sure that you set the tone and the culture for exactly what your expectations are for your security guards and just being realistic. Like if you have a retail store and you have a standing post and you have one guard there all day long, it's probably pretty unrealistic. Like you're gonna go through a lot of guards. No one wants to just stand on a corner all day. Like you do have to be just realistic with the expectations of the post that you're setting and this human. You know what I mean? Like there whether and then armed guards or unarmed guards. I don't recommend mixing the two. If you're gonna establish a protocol, it's easier to do it, especially if you want a hardened protocol with armed guards. But yeah, I mean, for me, when I switched security, I went there at 6 in the morning at the first shift change, and I helped security for 4 hours. This is
Mhm.
protocol. I set the tone. This is how we're checking for badges. This is how we're, and then every upgrade, I notify my entire tendency, and it's not an optional change. It's all
You
of
have to do
course.
this.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it's definitely all coming by force, and then like gradually things that I'll allow my security to take over that I might have been taking over. But the more you can institute someone that you can trust, the more technology you can give them. So it's
Hmm.
like a catch-22. If you don't feel like they're good, and then you're like, well, I don't want them in my systems, they're probably the
Yeah.
wrong people to be there, right? Like
Yeah.
you want to be able to trust them and put them into systems, but the overhaul of security, like it's never easy. It's something you want more references than you could ever imagine in life of, and everyone has something bad to say about their security company in California. I mean, it's like, of course, like, I mean, the best case is like, oh yeah, they tried to break in, but they couldn't. And then it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like that's great news. Or
Yeah.
like,
I'll write your name
yeah,
down.
exactly. Like, what did you have there? What kind of barriers are you using? Like,
Yeah.
what hold down gate did you have? I mean, you definitely want to like vet these types of changes they're just one of your most expensive, like when you're looking at your entire expense, like everything going out of your business, security is huge. It might
Yeah.
be bigger than almost anything else that you're paying besides your overall
Yeah.
utility. So you really want to make sure that like they have all the processes and the SOPs down that you
Yeah.
want. It's not,
Yeah.
they don't come in with their SOPs. Like, yeah, they come in with the rules and the law and the regulations to their job, but you need to take those into a far more detailed fashion of exactly what you want.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
should be able to meet you exceed that.
Yeah, I like what you said, essentially, like setting the tone, because folks here who are joining us or going through the CTA are looking to be owners or entrepreneurs or have your own businesses. So yes, it's cannabis. Like that's one thing I've always said. There's sometimes there's lacks because of the commodity of the product, because it's weed, it's cannabis, right? People are having fun. Cannabis makes you happy, makes you smile, makes me smile. But that does not mean that there's a lax in how you are running and operating your business, because at the same time, we have seen some tragedies happen with lack of security, or even just like, who knows what to call it, but it's important. Prevention is always better than cure. That's what my dad said. And I'll roll with that. I have one more question coming from the chat, and then we'll talk a little bit more about implementation, because I want to get into training and personnel that you mentioned. If you're in delivery or distribution, what is the main security and safety feature you should look for or look to have?
So that's a great question because in these instances, you have a very controlled environment, right? Like you're going to the customer, you're going to the business. Everything that you need to look at is essentially starting from your perimeter in your facility and how you're going to create a very protected, secure place, right? So fencing, whether it's lighting, I mean, you're going to want to make it essentially like, I wouldn't want to say Fort Knox, but
Mhm.
once everything's in there, it needs to be as safe as possible. Just delivery wise and distribution wise, unfortunately, it's like you can have the GPS on the vehicles, of course. You can have all the cameras in the world. You can have self-established, like on the back of your armed vehicle, you can have separate fenced areas and separate safe areas for cash, but it doesn't matter. Like if somebody wants that car and they want to take that car, I mean, it's all going to come externally. They're going to follow. I mean, in California, it was even crazy because the state disclosed the addresses of every single cultivator and distributor and everything. So it was like, well, they don't even have to wonder where we are. Or in
Yeah.
Oakland, for instance, they'll literally follow around the code inspectors that specifically work in cannabis and just see where all the cultivators are. But it's more for making sure that the first thing that you can control is your facility.
Hmm.
Everything outside of that, it's much harder to control. But GPS tracking, videos, the
Hmm.
different locks and monitoring that you can do on that vehicle is wonderful. Those are things that you're definitely going to want. It's almost everything that you can do as opposed to training your driver to be very vigilant and what to do when they think they might be followed, or like obviously don't stop at McDonald's. Like one of the most recent robberies from a really large distributor that I knew about out here, like they picked up a lot of product in between dropping it off in a very dangerous area. They stopped at McDonald's and they got robbed at the McDonald's. You need to go from point A to point B and then back. There's a lot of things that might be common sense that are not common sense. Or if you, like one thing that I have one of our tenants do, if you know that you have already been identified as a high target individual moving around and you need to hire an additional private guard to follow, whether it's product or yourself or whatever it is, then these are things that you just have to do.
Yeah.
Especially in distribution. Like, I mean, we can get into all the different things, gets hairy, but yeah, just making sure that
Yeah.
like you are as safe as possible and the vehicle is as tracked and as surveyed as possible with all the additional cameras that you can imagine. But yeah, creating Fort Knox is also crucial.
That is exactly. You can't do too much when it comes to security. You can go above and beyond just what the regulations say, just for
But
your peace of mind.
delivery, I'm sorry. My brain, if I don't say it in 5 seconds, I forget it. And then delivery, like if you, it's obvious
Yeah.
things that you might be looking for because it's less about maybe your hub. That's going to be an inside job, obviously, than
Yeah.
a customer robbing you. But just being very vigilant about who the customer is. And if it's a high cash order and it's their first time ever placing an order with you and something looks a little bit off, make sure that you do a little due diligence. Or
Yeah.
maybe you set a cap of the first time customer or something. But, you know,
Yeah. That's actually something I didn't think about before, just to kind of like ease people in. What you trying to do over here? All
yeah,
right.
I mean,
I want to talk a little bit about what we are actually seeing in dispensaries and in cultivation processing. Like you go from writing these plans down to now implementing them and making sure that they are compliant. I want to talk a little bit about audits and how you prepare for that before we start to wrap up in a bit. But when I go into a cultivation or when I go into a dispensary, I'm going through the same process. Like nothing is really changing for me, for that dispensary or cultivation that I'm going through. It just feels like if anything does change, I would be like, oh, okay, a step is not happening. So for our students who are here looking for implementation, because it's different to write these things out and have this idea, um, how do you get your staff up to par on your security plans and then have them implement your SOPs? And does that truly help prevent inside jobs? Or how do you how can you prevent an inside job, so to say?
I feel like that's a great question. I always say like 99% is always an inside job.
Yeah, that's
But
what I hear in cannabis too. So people do a lot of due diligence. We did a webinar recently on workforce development. Actually, our last webinar was on that. Learn how to hire the right people. Maybe you'll start there. But yes, talk to us about if you
yeah,
can, like how do you
no, for
prevent
sure.
inside jobs? How do you train your staff? Because now you're training them to know what to do. But
I mean, I have personal stories for galore, but I would just say, you start like originally in cannabis, and I'm sure, going from like a legacy place to like legal where we are now, you used to only hire your friends and like
mm-hmm,
you had a lot of rapport with them and you knew exactly where their mom lived and like it was a trusted situation. Then we go into like you hire on Indeed. You've never met these
right.
people before. I would never interview people where my office was. Like
Mm-hmm,
I had a non-cannabis office that I would always interview people at. I would start there multiple interview phases, and then if I do want to, I'm like, your references are the key to success, like making sure that you're going in and calling every single reference and still even like, let's be honest, are they going to put the bad references? Like if they just robbed the
no.
last delivery service that they worked at, do you think they're going to
All right.
put like they were at Green Organics? Like no, because
Right.
it's so hard. Like you still have to have like a lot of good just personal interaction, like trying to like make sure that it's the best fit for you.
Mhm.
And then going in the interview, just like trying to like pull out the worst of them as best that you can. Give me an example of a time that you weren't seeing eye to eye with a coworker. You didn't see eye to eye with a customer. Something was escalated. Like, do you have de-escalation training, and what does that look like? It's so much different though to just
Yes.
open up a business that requires so much trust to the general public. But also, then it's like, all right, so what? Let's say you hire a criminal on accident, like then what? It's up to everyone else. It's like the airport. Like see something, say something. Like I literally had an example of a guy that was renting space in a distro to a brand and their manager this just goes back to technology too. Like he cut Wi-Fi on a Friday. Nobody knew. He was playing with the electrical devices. People saw it. Nobody thought of anything. Like, if you see something that looks like somebody might be tampering, you should
Yeah.
absolutely call it out. But you shouldn't leave it just to your employees. You should have technology that's automated in a sense where you're automatically notified where these things happen because unfortunately, and then just redundancy again, right? If it's someone really high up and they have all this information, it's a problem. But let's say they do. You as the owner, you should at least have like we had backup cameras that were on a different set than this person. So he thought he had pulled all the cameras,
Yeah.
but in reality, he had forgot a set because he never knew about that set, right? So we were still able to catch him. And like these things were so dumb. It was just like he said he was kidnapped. Like he put in his own code in the burglary system. Like I and they did a lot to like actually try to hire well in this role, and it was still such a failure. But like again, it's really hard to trust people you don't know, and you're hiring majority of people that you don't know. So
Yeah.
make sure that you have all these layers and protocols and automated systems and security features that will give anyone you hire, like even if their entire purpose is to rob you and they see all of this automated technology that you have for security features, they're going to be like, oh, well, I'm going to get caught immediately. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't
if
make
my
sense.
fob, yeah, like it doesn't even make sense. Like every camera's going to see me, every fob's going to register me. Like there's all this redundancy, but it is, I wish there was like a magic tool, you know, or like glass where you could be like, ask these questions, call these
Yeah.
references, run their background, you know, if nothing bad is on there, nothing bad will ever happen. But sometimes when you're in such a tempting environment, you know, you really have to make sure that you can trust the people that you work with. But it's really hard. Yeah. There's always,
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely. Do your due diligence. Do your due diligence with those consultants. Do your due diligence with hiring. It's all important. Like this is your baby you're essentially protecting, right? You put all this money into your business. Sure, you want it to see it unscathed as
don't
much
put
as
it past anyone. I mean,
much. Don't put it past
yeah.
anyone. That should be on a t-shirt. Don't put it past them.
Like I was
Protect your
recently
stuff.
watching the Bernie Madoff documentary. Like,
Uh-huh.
don't, you know, even if it's family, you know, check their
Right.
references.
Check the references. If you don't get
No,
anything out of this webinar, check the references.
all the references. Yeah.
I do have another question because cybersecurity seems like its own kind of lane when I think about safety and security. So we're talking about hard assets here, cameras, fencing, things that actually, assets, you have to buy them.
Mhm.
Cybersecurity we're seeing is a huge breach that's happening, not just in the cannabis industry, but in all industry. I feel like I get a text message every other day telling me my password has been part of a major data leak. And at this point, I'm just like, I'm out there. I'm out there. Everybody knows my stuff. Everybody knows my password. Like, what is the point of protection? Can you just talk to us a little bit? I'm not sure if this is a question, but just talk to us about what you're seeing, learning, and hearing about the cybersecurity space, because you are getting a lot of customer data. You are using POS systems. Not saying that there's some people hacking dispensaries and or cultivations. I haven't heard stories of that, but like prevention is better than cure. Like, what are we learning about the cybersecurity space as it relates to cannabis?
Yeah, I would say like to your point, like cybersecurity is so huge. And then
Mhm.
in cannabis, we don't necessarily have all the technology that all the other companies might have for firewalls and robust things. But essentially, like without going into too many possibilities, right? If you
Mhm.
take payments in anything, you're at far more risk, period.
Mhm.
If you have Wi-Fi, let's say you're a retail store,
Mhm.
and you're taking payments, and someone comes in and you don't have guest Wi-Fi, or you don't have your employees on their own Wi-Fi, or visitors on your own Wi-Fi, you are putting yourself at extreme risk, period.
Mhm.
Like you should bring someone in. Like I would recommend bringing someone in. This probably is definitely not the same as your security person just because but they might be able to at least refer you to someone that can set up all of these protocols for you
Mhm.
inside of like your payments. Again, you need a separate Wi-Fi. I would recommend like multiple Wi-Fis, right? You have a guest Wi-Fi, you have a payments Wi-Fi, you have a regular Wi-Fi for your managers. You want to get all of these things separated. They have a lot of technology for monitoring where you can see like users in the system, what that looks like when it's regular, and then you can train it to see if things are starting to get hacked and what that might look like and prevent hacks. But it's a huge thing. Like I was listening to an NPR show, and it was like 90% of cyber attacks are all small businesses. And like if
Mm,
you even in the hosting of your website, like there was a bot that attacked a small business, not even in cannabis, but it just caused a constant refresh. You
right.
definitely want a private VPN for sure.
Yeah.
Caused a constant refresh to the point where like she was never able to take a another order. You know, and these
Mm,
are all things like when you're going into setting up your system, it's very important to think about cybersecurity and where
yeah.
all this information is. Like if you have a retail store and you can put together an IT room that houses all of your camera technology, all of your access technology, your fob systems, all the information that goes along with that, any switches, anything that has to do with surveillance, your hard drive and all the storage of however many days locally, state, however many you want in one place. Usually this room gets really hot, so it might need separate air conditioning literally just for this one room, but it should be the most secure room you have, along with your safe. You know, like
Yeah.
being able to isolate all this into one place where you can see easily, eyes on it, and then put someone in that room that knows a lot about cybersecurity to make sure that your systems are safe, especially when you're in retail. Like I'd
Yeah.
say, like if you're retail facing, you're customer facing, cybersecurity should definitely be very top of mind.
Yeah. And one thing we're going to get into for folks who are going through your courses, make sure you get all the way through. Level 9 is dropping really soon. We're going to have some more conversations there about secure transport of things. Like how do you securely transport items, whether it's cash, whether it's inventory valuables, and how do you set up that level of security? We won't get into all of that now, but for those who might be thinking about it, that is coming up in future webinars. One of my last questions for you, because you just brought this to me. What are some of the differences in safety and security features from the cultivation manufacturing side versus the retail side? Or is kind of safety security kind of one-stop shop built, safety security in a box? You can just roll out for your cannabis business. And is that something folks want to like know when they're asking consultants, like, hey, if they've done safety and security for just cultivation only, could they do safety and security for retail? Do those two sort of you know they cross?
I think there's a lot of crossover.
Mhm.
In general, like training, let's say personnel wise, training for the personnel, armed, unarmed, not a big deal. More so like in reinforcements, if they really understand like retail security as a form of constant bombardment and constant, nighttime attacks almost in a way. Like for California, it's far more of do you understand roll down gates? Do you understand like locking mechanisms? It's one point of entry. It's usually much smaller than securing all these gates on like a multi-acre farm. But one thing about retail, like it's usually the hot spot, right? Like for me, my farm out in Salinas, like it's in the middle of nowhere. Like
Right.
the security that we have out there, we have one entry point. Otherwise, it's completely fenced. It's not near a metropolitan area where it's become as much of a hurdle to put in a lot of reinforcements because it's really just that one point of entry. They're checking same scenario, right? Who are you? Who are you visiting? Like for my properties, escorts required, mandatory. There's no, I don't care if you're an inspector, I don't care if you're the CRC and you show up unannounced, you're not gonna be walking around on this property without an escort. Every business you're here to see needs to greet you and bring you in. Then badging, same scenario, retail, cultivation, manufacturing, badging visitors, recording visitors, making sure that they're escorted. Similar. Um, yeah, I would just say like it's all about where your product is and how it's moving. So in retail, you'll have a lot of deliveries, right? Like on a farm, like you got a big dirt truck coming. Like it's
Yeah.
also a security like moment, like the gate is open if somebody wanted to come, but it's also like you have to know exactly when people are harvesting and it's much more of
Yeah.
like an inside job kind of thing. I think
Yeah.
that's also the easy glimpse to look at, like cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, a lot more of inside job. Retail, in my experience, especially out here, it's just like how often is the car going to try to ram in the front door, and how big are the bollards you can put in the ground, and will the local city actually allow you to put them in the sidewalk, and like can your security consultant help with that and help you understand ways to mitigate that one glass storefront you might have. So it's
Yeah. Because they
yeah,
will plow through that. Okay. Do not put it past
definitely,
people. They just
definitely.
want to run a truck through. Hopefully, I watch a lot of heist shows. Like people
Yeah.
do it. So do
And
not put it past.
so,
And there's even security around like the glassware you install in your dispensary as well. So when you're
definitely
working with contractors, make sure you're asking about those questions as well.
right
Those are
that.
important. Exactly. I have two more questions for you just before we wrap up, because one just popped up to mind, and one is something I ask every instructor that comes through. Auditing. Like you done all of this security, you done all of this setup, let's say the CRC comes through and wants to audit. Do you have an SOP that speaks to how you prepare for an audit? One, and number two, what are some of those things you need to make sure you have? There's like top line, baseline for auditing of
Yeah.
your security and safety features.
Absolutely. I would go off of like their main requirements first. Like they're gonna audit the things that they asked you in your plan that you submitted. And you should have SOPs surrounding all of those items. They're gonna say, show me your cameras, show me rewind X amount of time. You're gonna need to be able to show them exactly what they want to see based upon what you wrote down with an SOP definitely in there. I say all that to say, like, the best kind of auditing you can do is understanding what they're looking for, right? Like, you should be able to ask them exactly the things that they're going to come and look at, or at least after you get your first audit, you're like, this is pretty standard. They want me to pull up my metric. They're going to want me to go a random date X amount of time ago and show them how the product moved. All the product that's in my metric right now that's active, they want to see it. They want to see it tagged with the tags. They want to see it individualized. If you're testing things, the quarantines, like
Mhm,
you have an idea based on the regulations of what they're going to audit for. But
mhm,
for you, like, I always kind of look at things three tiers. Like, you have a job card, right,
mhm,
for something you want to accomplish, and then you get way more granular. So
mhm,
the idea is passing an audit, right? Like for me myself, I'm gonna have a card that's an SOP or a checklist of everything that I'm gonna go through, maybe on a monthly basis or weekly basis, and audit myself. So
Oh,
I know,
that's smart.
yeah, when a random audit comes, I already know these are the things that I'm triple checking my employees are keeping really good record on and are trained really well on and have the logs to go with all this information, or
Right,
like
right.
things like we all know the things that ideally you want to know the top of the list, right?
Yeah.
Like all the things are going to come in there, and then at the bottom of the list, like darn, if you left the isopropyl alcohol on the table and it wasn't in the actual like red cabinet, is that as high on the list? Like, no, it's probably further down on the list compared to track and trace and
That,
understanding everything in metric. But like auditing for me is understanding what they're looking for and trying to reverse engineer it into my standardized operating procedures. So I'm auditing myself. Like, I'd
that's
much rather hire the right person that's like, Maria audited everything today. This was great, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, man, I'm happy that I have you here to prepare because, I know they're coming one day. And just like,
they're going to come. They're going to come. And honestly, you keep track of, that's a great question. How do you keep track of all of this? I know some people do it digitally. There's data rooms that are also pretty protected. Some people have manual logs to support their digital logs. Marie, you have anything to add on that?
oh, so much paperwork. Like out here, you have to have 7 years. Like you have to have 7 years of hard copies of things because like the waste paper. But digital copies are amazing. I like to have both for a certain amount of time. A great example is just cash payments. Let's say a vendor came in. Let's say that you paid them $10,000 for a payment. They said you didn't. What does that log look like? Did you have them sign something and said, I took $10,000 from you, signed Jacob? Is it on camera right then? Did you record that? Like, do you have a receipt
Yeah.
of that transaction? Do you have a digital copy of everything that was done in that room, on paper? Here's the receipt. Here's the 10K. Here's Jacob was with a thumbs up in the picture.
And the camera.
How, yeah, like, and how deep do you go in these things? Because you really do have to present different cases for your business in an example like that of making sure that you can provide hard copy, soft copy, and a repertoire of it. It could be, encrypted in all these different ways. That's important. But like, I would say organize it all right. Monthly, weekly, daily, and then assign it to someone.
Right. Right. Nice. Thanks for that. All right. We are going to wrap up. Just had a dump of information in mind. I'm thinking about so much. Will we have more security courses? I think we'll have more conversations. The CTA is definitely going to get more robust with our courses, so look out for that. Marie, something I ask every instructor, what is the advantage of taking your course?
I would just say, like, the best thing is saving money and saving time, right? And
Yeah,
understanding every little detail. And if you can go in and it's not that much time, it will save you a vast amount of understanding. Number one, you'll have a full understanding. Number two, you'll save so much money. I mean, just even all of these things cost so much money. Hardware for a safe, what safe to buy, where to put the safe, how to reinforce the safe, your entryway, your windows. Like, we're talking about things that are very important in the protocol of ongoing business. Like,
yeah,
your business being able to continue to operate after an emergency happens, after a robbery happens, after you have a loss or diversion of product is so crucial. And it's the things that you can prevent now that will save you 100 times later. Like putting the bollards up and working with the city in the beginning,
yeah,
having a proper roll down gate in the beginning, instead of a car coming in twice in 2 weeks' time because you can't even repair it and get it back into an operational place safety wise before it's broken into again. So
yeah,
and then just going into insurance and understanding like you need to talk to your insurer. You need to make sure that everything that is required in a claim is going with everything that you're doing in your build out. If they say you need X lock and X safe and you don't put those in the beginning because you already bought a safe and you already bought a lock, like these are the things that we're trying to save you from the beginning because safety and security is pretty robust, but we can drill it down to your site plan, your facility, room by room, fob by fob, and at least
right.
making sure that you've thought about most of the unknowns that are going to walk through these doors,
Yeah,
whether they're
yeah.
positive or
And you're
negative.
ready for
Yeah, you know
them.
what I mean? Whether it's a burglar, whether you can catch them 5 blocks away instead of like me on my facilities, some of my tenants are so nervous they send me photos of cars that are out there and I just like have a zoom back time and I'm like, it's an innocent guy, bro. He's just going
Yeah,
through like, okay,
yeah.
I can leave now, but
But
like
you want to be able to do that.
exactly. Like these are all the things that like it's not because you want to do it, it's because something might happen and then you're walking it back. We're like, where did this come from? How was this threat originated? What could I have done to prevent this in the future? And usually it's expensive,
Yeah,
especially if you've already created one install, one build out, one pathway that you already dumped a lot of money into. So long story short, for just saying, like if you can put the horse in front of the cart on a lot of these things that cost you a lot of time. If you can't operate, it'll only help you in the future.
I'll help you. Listen, don't ask, assume, do not play around with safety and security. Thank you so much, Marie, for this conversation. This will be up on our CTA portal in no time. Thank you to everybody who asked a bunch of questions. This was so interesting and engaging. Next week, we're back again with more of level 8, this time talking about our environmental SOPs. So make sure you stick with us then. Until then, everybody have a great Tuesday. And thank you for joining our live Q&A. Thank you, Marie. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.